Moana won the weekend. $43 million domestic, $95 million worldwide, number one at the box office. And it may still be the movie on this chart with the biggest financial problem. Meanwhile, a horror movie that opened in fourth place has a much easier road to profitability. A franchise that just posted its weakest debut is holding better than expected. Another Disney movie carrying the same reported production budget is closing in on $900 million worldwide. And a smaller historical drama has already earned more domestically than it cost to produce. Rank the weekend by ticket sales, and Moana wins comfortably. Rank it by which movies can afford the results, and the chart looks completely different. Because every forecast can be wrong. The real question is whether the movie was built to survive it. Hey everyone, Chris here, the Critical Nerd, and I gotta say a huge thank you to everyone returning to the channel. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Stick around, because today we're breaking down the July 10th through 12th box office. But this is not another video where, somebody points at Moana's reported $250 million budget and says, Disney's cooked, and then spends 12 minutes in finding increasingly creative ways to repeat the word flop. The opening, it was bad. We can establish that without holding a congressional hearing. The more interesting story is why silver movies missed expectations this weekend, but the consequences are completely different depending on what each one cost. A $20 million movie can open below tracking and recover. An $85 million movie can post the weakest debut in its franchise and still have room to breathe. A $250 million production does not have that luxury. So let's look at what happened, starting with the market Disney walked into. Hey everyone, Chris here, the Critical Nerd, and thanks to everyone returning to the channel. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Stick around, because today we're breaking down the July 10th through 12th box office. But this is not another video where somebody points at Moana's reported $250 million budget and says, Disney's cooked, and then spends 12 minutes finding increasingly creative ways to repeat the word flop. The opening, it was bad. We can establish that without holding a congressional hearing. The more interesting story is why silver movies missed expectations this weekend, but the consequences are completely different depending on what each one cost. A $20 million movie can open below tracking and recover. An $85 million movie can post the weakest debut in its franchise and still have room to breathe. A $250 million production does not have that luxury. So let's look at what happened, starting with the market that Disney walked into. The live-action Moana arrived only 19 months after Moana 2 became a billion-dollar movie. At the same time, Toy Story 5 was still drawing families in its fourth weekend, and Minions and Monsters had only been in theaters for 12 days. That put three major family properties in direct competition for the same parents, the same children, the same premium screens, and the same household entertainment budget. Awareness was never going to be the issue. People know Moana. They know the characters, the music, the story, and the giant demigod played by The Rock. The animated sequel already proved that the franchise remained popular. But knowing what something is does not create an urgent need to buy another ticket. That is the weakness in the way Hollywood often talks about tracking. The research may show that people recognize the title. It may show that they like the property. It may even show that they intend to see the movie eventually. Eventually, though, it's not opening weekend. Disney released another enormously expensive family movie into a crowded marketplace and trusted recognition to do the work of urgency. Well, recognition showed up. Urgency, though, that appears to have missed the flight to Montuai. Here's how the weekend finished. Moana took first place with $43 million. Minions and Monsters earned $20.5 million in its second weekend, falling 45%. Toy Story 5 added $18.5 million in weekend 4, declining 39%. Evil Dead Burn opened with $13.7 million. Young Washington brought in $6.4 million, down 67%. The Invite expanded and jumped more than 700% to $5.7 million. And Supergirl fell another 59%, earning $3.6 million in its third weekend. That is the order on the box office chart. It's not the order I would use if the question is which studio should feel best on Monday morning. For that, we have to start comparing the size of the result with the size of the gamble. Let's begin with Young Washington. The movie fell 67% in its second weekend. That's a rough decline. There's no reason to massage it into something prettier. But the production budget was $20 million. The film opened with just over $19 million and has now reached $33.1 million domestically. That does not automatically make it profitable, but it gives the movie a plausible road toward recoupment without requiring a massive international performance. The audience arrived early. The second weekend proved that the demand was front-loaded, but the initial investment was low enough that an imperfect theatrical run does not immediately become a financial disaster. A $20 million historical drama can succeed by reaching a specific audience. It does not need to become the defining cultural experience of the summer. Apparently, building a movie around the audience, it is actually likely to attract is still an available business model. Somebody should tell that to Hollywood. Then we have Supergirl. And no, we're not doing another complete autopsy. We've already established the cause of death, contacted the next of kin, and raised several reasonable questions about the studio's life insurance policy. The number that matters this weekend is $3.6 million. That brings the domestic total to $66 million and the worldwide total to approximately $115 million, against a listed production budget of $170 million. Some are saying $180 million. Its 77% second weekend collapse ended any realistic chance of developing the legs needed to close that gap. This weekend's 59% drop is not a new story. It's confirmation of the one we've already covered. The movie did exactly what the early receipts indicated it would do. There's no need to hold another funeral while the body is still warm. Minions and Monsters opened with $37 million. That was the weakest domestic opening in the broader Despicable Me franchise. By the standards of the series, it was disappointing. But this weekend, it fell 45% and earned another $20.5 million. Its domestic total has reached $108 million, while the worldwide gross stands at approximately $280 million. The listed production budget is $85 million. That gives Universal options. The film can absorb a weaker than expected opening, continue earning overseas, and benefit from respectable weekend holds without needing the theatrical equivalent of divine intervention. It may not reach the heights of the franchise's biggest entries, but the cost structure leaves room for an ordinary commercial performance. That is what financial discipline looks like. Not every movie needs to cost enough money to qualify as a regional infrastructure project. Sometimes the little yellow creatures can simply make the movie, sell the toys, and go home. Next is Toy Story 5. This movie also carries a listed production budget of $250 million. The difference is that it produced the level of revenue expected from something that is expensive. Toy Story 5 opened to nearly $160 million domestically. After 4 weekends, it has earned approximately $404 million in North America and $475 million internationally. That puts the worldwide total at roughly $879 million. It's not a $1 billion yet, but it is moving toward that neighborhood and dropped only 39% this weekend. That gives us the cleanest comparison on the entire chart. 2 Disney family movies, the same reported production budget tier, completely different financial positions. The lesson is not that spending $250 million suddenly becomes wise because the characters are made of plastic. That level of spending creates enormous risk regardless of the franchise. But Toy Story 5 delivered blockbuster revenue to match the blockbuster investment. Disney took a massive swing and the audience responded at the necessary scale. With Moana, Disney spent in the same general tier and received an opening that might have looked respectable for a movie costing half as much. The budget is not the entire story. The relationship between the budget and the realistic demand is the story. Evil Dead Burn opened in 4th place with $13.7 million domestically and $27 million worldwide. That came in below the expectations surrounding the release, but the production budget was $20 million. That gives the movie time. It can continue earning over the next several weekends, add revenue through international markets, and eventually benefit from home entertainment and streaming. The opening does not have to support a $250 million production. Warner Brothers did not spend the equivalent of 4 or 5 horror movies to make one horror movie. That sounds obvious, yet the industry regularly behaves as though every recognizable title requires a budget large enough to place the studio itself in peril. An opening miss on a $20 million film is a problem to manage. An opening miss on a $250 million production becomes the subject of the next earnings call. Both movies can fall short of expectations. Only one needs the analysts to begin using phrases like long-term financial strategy, while the stock price quietly backs toward the nearest exit. One of the weekend's more interesting results came from The Invite. The film expanded into more than 1,600 theaters and earned $5.7 million. That was an increase of more than 700% from the previous weekend. It nearly caught young Washington while receiving a fraction of the attention surrounding Moana, Supergirl, Toy Story, or Minions. We do not have enough public cost information to declare it the weekend's secret profit champion, but it does demonstrate something Hollywood frequently claims audiences no longer do. They discovered a movie. There was no billion-dollar sequel creating automatic awareness, no cinematic universe, no 40-year franchise history, no requirement to watch 3 streaming shows and a post-credit scene before understanding the plot. The movie expanded, people found it, and the revenue increased. Apparently, audiences will still watch something that was not previously sold to them as a lunchbox. I mean, who knew? Now we get to Moana. The movie earned $43 million domestically and $52 million internationally, producing a $95 million worldwide opening. The reported production budget is approximately $250 million. That is where most of the online analysis ends. $250 million going out, $95 million in worldwide ticket sales during the first weekend. Bad result. And yes, it is a bad result. But the production budget alone does not tell us how high the movie's financial hurdle actually is. So let's run a reasonable model. We start with the reported $250 million production cost. Disney has not disclosed the full worldwide marketing bill, so we should not present an estimate as though we found Bob Iger's personal spreadsheet lying unattended at an airport Chili's. For a global release of this size, using a marketing range of $100 to $150 million gives us an estimated investment between $350 and $400 million. Then we apply the theatrical revenue split. For this model, we will assume Disney receives roughly 55% of the domestic ticket sales and 40% internationally. Based on Moana's opening mix, that produces a blended studio return of approximately 47%. In practical terms, the $95 million worldwide opening may represent roughly $44 million returning to Disney through theatrical rentals. Now apply that percentage to the full investment. To recoup $350 million from theatrical revenue alone, the film would need approximately $750 million worldwide. At the higher end of the cost model, that target approaches $860 million. That does not mean the movie must earn exactly that amount before Disney can ever claim a profit. I mean, there is streaming value, home entertainment, licensing, and merchandise. All that stuff can help. Residuals, financing, overhead, and talent participation can move expenses in the other direction. We do not have Disney's internal profit and loss statement, and I'm not going to invent a precise financial loss just because a dramatic number would look good in a thumbnail. What the available information tells us is that a production this expensive likely needs a worldwide theatrical run somewhere around $750 million or more to put itself in a comfortable financial position. Moana opened at $95 million. That means it may need to earn roughly 8 times its global opening to reach the upper end of the theatrical recoupment range. The movie did receive an A- cinema score, so the audience response gives it some hope, but good word of mouth is no longer a bonus. It is now doing unpaid accounting work. The film cannot simply remain number 1 for a weekend and declare victory. It needs to hold for several weeks, perform strongly in the remaining international markets, and withstand the Odyssey arriving this coming Friday. That is an enormous burden for a live-action remake released 19 months after the franchise's previous movie crossed $1 billion. The animated sequel proved that people still love Moana. The remake now has to prove they were ready to pay for nearly the same voyage again. To wrap this up, this was not a weekend where audiences rejected every familiar property. Toy Story 5 is approaching $900 million. Minions and Monsters recovered from a weak franchise opening with a solid second weekend hold. A smaller horror movie opened below expectations but retained several paths toward recovery because the costs remained manageable. Young Washington fell sharply but entered that decline after producing a respectable domestic total against a $20 million budget. And The Invite expanded because audiences still occasionally discover movies without a corporate nostalgia campaign explaining why they are important. The common thread is not simply franchise fatigue. It is the disappearance of margin for error. When a movie costs $20 million, the forecast can be wrong and the studio still has ways to recover. When the production cost reaches $250 million before marketing, the prediction cannot merely be close. The film has to become one of the biggest releases of the year. That is why the weekend chart says Moana won, while the financial model says Disney still has a serious problem. Hollywood keeps treating recognition as guaranteed demand and setting budgets as though every familiar title comes with $1 billion floor. It does not. Audiences decide what a movie is worth after the studio has already spent the money. And this weekend, that difference became impossible to hide. Let me know which results surprised you the most. Was it Moana's opening, the continued strength of Toy Story 5, the hold for Minions and Monsters, or The Invite quietly showing up while everyone was staring at Disney? Do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you have not already, share the video out there with your friends and family, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next breakdown. Keep your expectations low and your receipts high. I'm Chris, the Critical Nerd, and I am out.